You either use the internet for fun or you use the internet to grow. You're here to grow. Welcome to TRS Clips. Let's take a deep dive into stem cells.
Yeah.
From literally the 101 till whatever it is in 2023, up till what it's going to become in 10 years' time. I think only one or two people on this show out of 500 episodes have ever even brought it up. Chris Gethin, who's a world-renowned trainer, brought it up because he said that all his inflammation on his tennis elbows, shoulders went down because you take stem cells and you inject it into those joints. And then there's a treatment that follows over the course of 1 or 2 days. And eventually that joint heals. A lot of my friends, even myself, like I've been weight training for a while, you do end up getting inflamed joints. So I know that that's one of the most basic applications. And the only other thing I know about stem cells is that, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, they're found in babies' umbilical cords, and I believe they're found in your bone marrow.
That's right.
Am I right?
Absolutely.
You extract them from your own bone marrow. Stem cells are the cells that can become any other cell in your human body.
Very accurate. Yeah.
It can also become a nerve cell.
Absolutely.
But you guys have only figured out how to turn it into a nerve cell in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yes. Longer than that. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, like application wise, probably in the last 5 to 10 years, which is why I said the Michael Schumacher thing. Anyway, so you extract it out of your bone marrow, and then I don't know what happens. I don't know what happens in your lab.
The story of stem cells is fascinating. Okay. It's not just what's happening now. It's what the future is going to be. All right. When I was a medical student, what I'm already doing now would come under science fiction then. If in the 1980s we spoke about this, it would be pure science fiction. But it's happening. So what exactly are stem cells? Now, in the world of medicine, we have two broad treatment interventions. We have drugs, medicines, pills, injections, okay? And we have surgery. You go, you cut, remove something, suture. So there's medicine, there's surgery. Now, there are many conditions where there are no drugs that can help and there's no surgery that can help. Of all of these, the most important are in nervous system diseases because neurological conditions, the brain and the nervous system was believed to not regenerate. So once there was damage, there was no drug you could give and there was no surgery you could do. Now but stem cells are cells which, not being a drug, not being surgery, what they do is they repair damage in the body biologically, you know. So it's like, imagine if you have a cut in your hand, how your wound heals. That's a biological healing, all right? So stem cells help in biological healing, right? Not as a drug, not as a surgery, but cell-to-cell interaction. This is the way the body had meant to heal. It's a natural system of healing. Now, we have stem cells in different parts of our body, but they take care of the normal wear and tear. So you have a certain injury here, there, and the local stem cells will help heal it.
Local stem cells.
I mean, you have stem cells. You have stem cells in the brain. You have stem cells, in your hair. You have stem cells. They're very small amounts. They're just for the local wear and tear. Okay. But if there is a severe damage, like if you have a brain injury, you have a spinal cord injury in adults, there are some conditions that are potentially fatal. One such condition is something called motor neuron disease, something that Stephen Hawking had, you know, the famous scientist from Cambridge. There was no solution to this. You know, these people just died. But because there was no drug and no surgery. But now with the availability of stem cells, we can actually help them. But the really more exciting area, the area which is now in the last few years become my focus, is actually children. Because in children, there are certain neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, where the brain from birth itself, okay, is not functioning appropriately. And because of that, there are a whole lot of symptoms that because of which these children cannot lead independent lives. Now, the thing about autism, and this is something the world is just not recognizing, you know, there is something in the USA called CDC, Center of Disease Control. They are the ones who give all the statistics on COVID and everything else. They've got the most accurate figures in the world on disease. And if you just see the figures of COVID, 10 years ago, 1 in 160 children had autism. Okay. I'm talking CDC figures on autism. 3 years ago, it was 1 in 54 children. 2 years ago, it was, last year it was 1 in 44. This year, it is 1 in 36. Okay, so from one child out of 160 children having autism 10 years ago to 1 in 36 today is a phenomenal increase. At this rate, in the next 20 years, every third child will have autism.
Why is this happening?
Now, that is $1 million question, because it's got to do a lot with multiple things. There are multiple factors there, some very controversial, some, not clear. So it's got to do with lifestyle. It's got to do with a whole lot of things. There are some people who said vaccines are responsible for it, but that's, again, very controversial. It's not something in the medical we talk much about. There's talk about mobile phone radiation causing it. There is talk about modern diet causing it. There's conversations about, people having children later in life, because, the older you get, if you have children, your child is more likely to have autism. So the causes of autism are many.
And biologically speaking, what happens in an autistic brain?
Yeah, exactly. So this is something we've done pioneering work on. We were among the first in the world. Surprisingly, despite the fact that there is such a high incidence of autism, nobody had really looked deep into the brains of these children to identify which parts of the brain are not working. And we actually did this research. There is now newer brain imaging. See, earlier we had just CT scan and MRI scans. But now we have something called PET CT scan, positron emission tomography CT, in which shows you which parts of the brain are working normally, which are working less, and which are working more. All right. And it's a color scan, so it's easy to, the green color is normal, blue is working less, yellow is working more. So we have identified that, these areas, the deep area of the brain we are talking about, the limbic system, the medial temporal lobe, and the small brain, the cerebellum, we have found, because we have done scans on over 3,000 children with autism. And we actually have clearly identified, almost for the first time in the world, which parts of the brain are not working appropriately in children with autism. And we've published this in a scientific paper in the World Journal of Nuclear Medicine.
Was it the lower brain, the animal brain, that was not very active?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that means the higher brains are much more active.
Exactly.
Which is why this whole angle about autistic kids being geniuses and
exactly.
All that. Wow.
Elon Musk had autism. Do you know that? You Google him. Elon Musk had autism as a kid, but this man is the richest man in the world today, and he changed the way the world thinks, because these people have, and I'm so happy you picked this up, because most people don't pick it up. You looked at what positive they have. The whole world is looking at what they don't have. And, Albert Einstein had autism. You know that, okay? And many of our big tech geniuses who run some of the biggest companies in the world, they didn't have, a minor version of autism is something called attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And then there is learning disabilities. Some of these people could not get through college and school. They didn't choose not to, whether it's Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. They didn't graduate from college, but they had a brilliance that was different.
Maybe it's the evolution of the human species.
Exactly. This is exactly what I've been talking about. And people don't, this is the next step in human evolution. And how do we know it? Because when we do the scans, we not only find parts of the brain which are not working, which we sort of anticipated, but there are parts of the brain which are working more. And we actually found, and this is shown in our published paper, that the brains of children with autism actually start functioning higher in the earlier years. They're functioning more than what is called neurotypical children. And then they decline. So now we don't use the word normal anymore. We say neurotypical. People like you and me are neurotypical. Children with autism are neurodiverse. There's a change in the mindset that, just like somebody can be tall, somebody can be short, somebody can be fair, somebody can be dark, somebody can have a brain that is like what we have, and somebody can have a brain like a person with autism. So we use the word neurotypical, neurodiverse. But normal kids actually start off lower, but then proceed to grow. So what we found is that when we give these children cell or stem cell therapy, that blue part of the brain, which was the blue, it's not actually blue, it's on the scan appears blue. It's called hypometabolic. That's brain that's little less active, functioning less. That this gets activated, this gets repaired, and this becomes functional. And once it becomes functional, these children don't just start leading what is called normal lives. They all have something peculiar, different, unique to give to the world, in which they completely excel. Things which are unimaginable, things that you and I cannot even imagine. now start functioning. So first, to go back to your question, how do stem cells work? So you answer it yourself. The first thing about stem cells is that when the stem cells have the ability to multiply, okay, and when they divide, they make a copy of themselves, another stem cell, but they also become any other cell of the body depending on where you put it. So if I take a stem cell and I put it in the nervous system, it will become a nervous cell. If I put it in the muscles, it will become a muscle cell. So depending on where you put it, it becomes that. So this amazing property of converting into other cell types, okay, and the ability to multiply. Along with that, what they do is they release certain positive chemicals in the body called growth factors. These help in the healing process. They also attract fresh blood towards them, called angiogenesis. This combination of being able to multiply, to divide, to release growth factors, to get fresh blood, they reduce the inflammation in the body, they modulate the immune system. There are several mechanisms. Basically, this helps repair what is non-functioning. And there's no drug that can do it. There's no surgery that can do it. Now, you mentioned about bone marrow and umbilical cord. So I just want to clarify that. Broadly speaking, cell or stem cells are of two types. What is autologous? That means when you take from the body. So from the body, you can take either from the bone or you can take from the fat. These are two areas from which you can actually get stem cells. Then there are stem cells which you take from. Now, so autologous is you take from your own bone and put it back in the body. Allogenic is when you take from somebody else. Okay, so for example, the umbilical cord that connects the mother and baby at birth, this is very rich with stem cells. So there are companies that go and collect this. Normally, this is thrown in the garbage. In some children nowadays, in fact, most children, they actually save it. So if you save it, you can use it in the future for the same child. But there are other companies that collect it from everywhere and they package it and it's available as a package sort of umbilical cord thing. So this is somebody else's cells and then your own cells. Now, we don't use the package umbilical cord because I believe your own cells are much better than somebody else's cells.
For your body.
For your body. Because one, they're your own cells, so body will accept it. Two, it's fresh. There's no preservative. You just take, what we do is we take from the bone marrow, we filter it, we run it through machines called centrifuges, isolate the stem cells, and within a few hours put it back. Whereas those are preserved, they belong to somebody else, they are cryo or frozen, and they add a preservative. So if I ask you which is better, take an orange and make fresh orange juice or have a canned orange juice, a fresh orange juice is better. So that's the difference between umbilical cord and what we do. That is autologous. Now the thing about autism is that once you repair, the other thing, very important, what we do autologous, we can inject it in the spinal fluid. So, our brain, it continues down as the spinal cord. And surrounding the brain, there is a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid. It's a fluid that circulates, it's continuously circulating. So what we do is with a little needle prick, we inject it into the lower back, into the fluid, because this fluid carries it to the brain. And when it goes to the brain, the part of the brain that's not functioning properly or that's damaged, it pulls the stem cells towards it.
Automatically.
The normal brain doesn't. It's like, let's say you are hungry and I've just had food and, somebody comes here with food. What's going to happen? You're going to make a grab for it. I'm full. I won't take it. So the body is like that. The body tissues they're not greedy. The parts that don't want it will not pull the stem cells, but the damaged parts will. And there's a lot of research to show that the stem cells home in to the damaged area actually has the stem cells come to them. So we inject it in the spinal fluid so it goes directly to the brain. Now, the umbilical cord cells, because they have a preservative, you cannot inject it in the spinal fluid. You have to give it intravenously like an injection. Now, when you do that, it goes from there to the heart, then to the lungs, from the lungs back to the heart, and then the heart sends it to the brain. So there's a long journey. In fact, a lot of these stem cells get trapped in the lungs. So for the first time in medical history, there is now a solution for autism, which is affecting 1 out of 36 children in America. In India, the figures are about 1 in 100, but I think that's because we aren't picking up enough. I mean, the documentation is not so solid and concrete. Actually, I think the incidence is much more.
Why do you think it's much more?
No, it'll be
much official more than India. Okay.
No. The official figures for India is 1 in 100. Official figures for America is 1 in 36. I think because they document more properly. Here, a lot of kids in the villages and all that, it will not get diagnosed. Sure. Now, what is a matter of great pride for me? like serious pride is that the world's first scientific PubMed index paper on the role of cell therapy in autism is published by us. Okay, the world's first paper. The second paper came from China, the third from Italy, the fourth and fifth came from Duke University, America. Now that is something nobody can take away. There can only be one person who climbs Mount Everest first, or one person who lands on the moon first. Everybody else follows. So now all the papers on cell therapy or stem cell therapy in autism have to cite us because we are the first to publish. And when I say the world's first paper, I never say I published the world's first paper, although I'm saying it to you. I always say the world's first paper on cell therapy in autism came from India. That is a matter of pride for me, that our country published the world's first paper on something new and completely innovative. After that, we have a total of 15 other papers on cell therapy in autism. And our second one after that was published in a very prestigious journal. All are published in very prestigious journals. And we have a total of 106 scientific papers, which is the largest in the world. So this is an area where our country is leading the way, not just me.
Is
our
it true
country.
that a lot of foreigners actually come to India for stem cell
Yes,
treatment?
I have treated patients from 75 different countries. 75.
Do they basically come here because it's more budget friendly here?
They're coming because it's not available there. Our results are better. And also because, of course, it is more budget friendly. But you have to understand, people travel 20 hours. I get patients every week. I get patients coming from America and Australia, from England. They fly 15, 20 hours to come here. Okay. So firstly, this treatment is not available everywhere else. It's not available as free, the way it is here, because a lot of the Western world hasn't accepted.
Why?
Okay. So there's a long story behind it. What happened is that in around 2001, President George Bush, he had banned embryonic stem cells. So to explain to you, we do from the bone marrow, but you can also get stem cells from the embryo. You have test tube babies, you have IVF. You should be familiar with IVF. So in that, you have what is called spare embryos. Okay, so you can actually make stem cells from that as well. Now, as you're aware, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't permit abortion or family planning. In fact, in America, there's a law. The Supreme Court actually, passed something on abortion. So abortion in many states is not allowed. That is because the Christian thinking is life starts at conception. When the sperm and egg come together, life starts. So anything you do after that, you're killing a living person. So that's the whole family planning abortion debate in the Western world. George Bush had banned federal funding. He said the government will not pay for research for embryonic stem cell. But people's hearing is, what people remember, George Bush banned stem cells. He didn't ban stem cells. He banned federal funding. He said government will not pay for research for embryonic stem cells. Again, what most people don't remember is when Obama became president, one of his earliest executive decisions was to lift that ban. Okay. Now, we are not using that. Okay. That is like, the whole mistake, the whole mess is right now, it's like beverages. Beverages has got alcohol. It's got canned juice, Pepsi, Coke, etc. And it's got homemade orange juice. They're all beverages. And what you're doing is you're taking something for alcohol and implying it for homemade orange juice. There's no connection. That's the mistake there. So what happened because of that in the Western world, in America, England, Canada, this all over Europe, this therapy did not develop. It developed in India, China, Korea, and Japan. We 4 countries are the leaders. India, China, Korea, and Japan. We are way ahead of the West. Now, the West, they just can't accept it. Because we are pioneering. I've done close to 13,000 patients already in the last 15 years. They are just starting, at some of their facilities, they're just starting to do the work.
In medical careers, experience plays a huge role.
Yeah. So that is happening. And the problem is not just that they aren't doing it. Our own doctors, we have what I call, and I say it openly, normally, we have what is called a colonial hangover. So when somebody with a white skin and a tag from Harvard, Stanford, Oxford comes and says, well, everybody's blah, 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 they are praising him, doing the arti, But when the same thing comes from Asia or India, they don't have the same respect for it. So I call it colonial hangover. It really is like that. We are pioneers. The world is following what we are doing. We are being quoted when patients go to doctors from there. They are actually being told to come here.
Also, I'm assuming that in the long term, if stem cell therapy really takes off in the mainstream, which I anticipate that it will.
It is. It is. Yeah.
It will affect big pharma badly.
Oh, you're brilliant here because this is so, you're touching the key points. One of the reasons that I was going to mention about it, that stem cell therapy hasn't taken off, it doesn't have backing from big pharma. In fact, a very senior executive from a multinational company told me, says, Dr. Sharma, you are an existential threat to us. I said, like what? So he said that if you make everybody okay, who will take our medicines?
So the big medical companies, the big medicine companies don't want stem cells to take off.
He used that word existential threat. I mean, that's huge. I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine in Jordan. And we have a meeting, all us stem cell therapy doctors for neuro, once a year we meet in different parts of the world. And 3 years ago we met in America and he was actually standing on the stage in front of hundreds of us and actually big, tall, tough guy. And he was in tears. You know the story he told us? This guy was using stem cells to reverse diabetes. And I've been to Jordan, I've met his patients. He completely reversed diabetes. Completely. Okay. People on insulin, all off. He said it publicly in front of all of us, that he was threatened by the companies manufacturing insulin because it's $1 trillion, not directly, but via. And he was told, either you stop your work on diabetes, we'll let you continue your other work, or we'll shut you down completely. And he said, I had to shut down. Okay. Now he's saying this publicly, all right? Because that insulin is $1 trillion industry. They cannot have that be replaced. So here is somebody from Jordan telling me that he had to stop his work on stem cells and diabetes because I'm not being, threatened like that. But yes, I have been attacked.
Really?
I've been seriously attacked. They've made so much effort. In fact, 400, I'm saying it publicly, 400 people in this field, in the field of autism, have got together. And I'm not saying it. They gave an article in Times of India saying we have 400 signatories. They're opposed to this work. Why? Because there's an entire economy that sustains on these kids never getting okay. Let's say you're running a rehabilitation center and these kids are coming, a child cannot talk. He comes to you for a lifetime of speech therapy. I treat him, he starts talking, he stops coming to you. So your business is directly affected. So there's this very strong lobby that is making all out attempts to shut me down. Okay. But we got our results and they made attempts. They were unsuccessful. And who stood by us? Our patients. When people made these attempts, our patients stood up. They signed petitions. They went on petition.org. They wrote to the Prime Minister, Health Minister, and Commissioner, and it was flooded with support for us. So eventually, what matters is people. If the parents of children who have improved are standing up and talking for us, that's real, okay? Because no parent is going to support something that has not worked for his child. Whenever you do anything innovative, whenever you do anything different, you challenge the status quo. There is an established business model of people who are sustaining on something not happening. Okay, when you threaten that, they are going to rise up and speak about you. And the real pity is that all these people, none of these people, they should come and if you say you're working in this field and there are people coming from all over the world here, they've not even once come and asked me, okay, to share our results, talk to us, speak to us. In fact, at least you should be wanting to learn and know what is going on. No, there's just an opposition. So anything new that anybody does, there will be resistance. There will be opposition. People will try to shut you down, but you just have to believe. You have to believe in yourself, to believe in your work. And most important, you have to, it's the people who are improving that become your support and your structure. So we have completely changed the thinking in the field of autism and neurodevelopmental disorders from nothing can be done to the fact that we can almost not just completely reverse it, but when you reverse it, these kids not just go back to independence, you start seeing the special abilities in them.
So the special abilities thing is something I want to deep dive in, first I want to put forward a hypothesis and correct me if I'm wrong medically. You spoke about how traditionally speaking, when a child is autistic, initially in his or her life, the growth of the brain and the functioning of the brain is greater than the average kid. And then there's like a dip.
Yes.
That's the traditional way that things work. Do you think that dip could be happening because of the medication given to the kid?
That could be medications. There are lots of theories about it. It could be lifestyle, diet, stresses. There are a million causes as to why. There are some people talk of genetics, a small percentage, 15 to 20%. Okay. There's a genetic background, but a majority of it is lifestyle. Sometimes it's during the birth process. Like, if the birth, that's why the role of gynecologist is just so important, because if there's a little hypoxia less of oxygen to the brain of the child when the child is being delivered, that can cause the kind of brain damage that we are seeing now in autism. So there could be many reasons.
New clips released at the same time that a podcast releases. This is TRS Clips. Make sure you subscribe.